I built this cigar box guitar quite a long time ago. In fact, it was probably one of my first couple of guitar builds before I ever even built a complete solid body electric guitar. I really like this build. I like the look of it. This box I think is really cool. The only problem is this thing's been sitting around since it's been built because, well, pretty much it's unplayable. Because I was still learning when I made this. And I made a few mistakes that caused this thing to really not work like it should. In this episode, we're going to rebuild this thing and make it usable again. Try out some new techniques. Learn some new things maybe. I'm Jeff. You're watching Home Built Workshop, so stick around. Before we go any further with this project, I just want to say you'll probably notice some audio issues. I ran into that. I didn't realize it until I sat down to edit this video. I don't know what the deal was, but it's about halfway through the video. It's going to get better. The audio is still there and it's totally usable, but just know that something went wonky and I'm sorry about that. Now let's jump into the video. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the workshop. I hope you are doing awesome. Yes, cigar box guitars. I've said it several times on different occasions. I think instruments like this are a great stepping stone if you're just getting into and learning the craft of building a guitar. There are certain things on a cigar box guitar that you don't really have to worry quite as much about as you would on other types of instruments. These are things like truss rods. Since these are only 3, sometimes 4 strings, you don't have to worry about a truss rod in there. There's just not enough string tension to really warrant the use of a truss rod. Another thing would be the fretboard radius. On a cigar box guitar, if you don't want to put a radius on there, you don't have to. So you don't have to worry about getting a radius in there, which means you also don't have to radius the frets. If you choose to use frets at all, you can build these completely fretless and they play just fine. They're pretty fun to use with a slide. However, this one's got frets and I think we're going to replace it with something with frets. But they're a great stepping stone, like I said, because you can kind of eliminate a few processes as you build your skills and work your way into building guitars. This particular guitar doesn't have either of those two things. There's no truss rod and there's no radius on the fretboard. But I said it's unplayable. Why is that? The problem on this particular instrument, aside from years of dust, lie right here, I guess, at what we would call the neck joint. If we open this up, you can kind of see in there, I had to remove some material from this neck. This is a 3/4 inch board that I used for the through neck with a 1/4 inch fretboard, which is typical for instruments like a regular solid body electric guitar. The problem is that I had to remove so much material to allow the lid to close that this neck bends a lot. I don't know if you can see that. I think I could probably snap this in half. So when I tune this up, even though this particular one was 4 strings, there was enough tension that it bowed the neck right here in this area that the action I could never get to where I could play much on it. Since this neck can so easily move, the stability is terrible, and I really quickly got tired of messing with it, and this thing just sat around for years and years. In fact, if you want to watch the video where I was working on this particular instrument, I'll put a link down below in the description. Just be warned, it's a little bit of an older video, but you can see kind of how this thing went together. Now, this problem was 100% due to my lack of experience. I don't know about you guys, but I learn best by doing things, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes. It helps build that pool of knowledge that we can pull from in the future. And when I built this guitar, I just didn't have it. But now I think we're in a spot where it'd be kind of fun to rebuild this thing, get it out from the corner, brush all the dust off it, make a few changes, and bring this thing back to life. I'm not going to worry about trying to save this piezo pickup. I've got some more of these here. The thing's glued in there. Not even going to try to pull it out. We'll just remove this neck. And really now, we can set this body aside. Now you can see how thin this material is right here. You can even see at one point I tried to add some strength by epoxying on this piece of aluminum. that didn't work because the flex is right here. In fact, I'll bet. Yeah, look how much flex that has. So we need to build this thing a little bit sturdier by starting with a completely new neck blank. After digging around the shop, I found a few pieces of wood. First is this piece of maple that I've been saving specifically for a cigar box guitar because I know that it's going to fit my cigar box neck template perfectly, and to make this neck a little sturdier because I know I'm still going to have to notch this out just like I did on the old neck. What I should have done on the old one was added a piece down here, sort of like an oversized stacked heel on an acoustic. That way I've got basically a double thickness of material here. That should add a lot more strength. We'll have the heel come outside the box, again like on an acoustic, and should prevent that awful bowing condition. So to prepare the blank, we're going to double stick tape this down, trim away the excess at the bandsaw, and then route everything flush with the router table. My template has the tuner hole locations on there, so I want to mark those now before I remove the template. I missed the trash. But anyway, there's our neck blank. Now, we're just going to take a piece of this stuff. I'm going to trim down a little strip that we can then glue on to the end. That way, it'll build us up a little bit stronger heel. With my neck blank and the piece for the stacked heel cut out, I need to glue this stacked heel to the neck blank. But I don't really know where exactly it's going to live. I've got some extra material on the neck blank that I know I'll need to trim off. But to really get an accurate measurement, I think I need a fretboard first. I found a little scrap of black walnut. I think it's going to be the perfect size. I think the walnut's going to give a nice contrast to the maple neck. All we need are some fret slots. But I'm going to do this one a little bit different. If you've been curious as to what this pile of necks behind me are all about, well, this is for an upcoming project and something I've been working on behind the scenes, getting this all set up to be cut out on my CNC machine. If you want to follow along with this build, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have notifications turned on. That way you get notified when this episode comes out. Like I said, I've been working on this behind the scenes, spending a lot of time programming stuff for the CNC. I think we can use the CNC machine to cut fret slots for this cigar box neck. I've put together a quick model for this little fretboard. Really wasn't all that hard since there's no taper or anything like that. One thing I want to do a little bit different that I've never seen on a cigar box guitar. Let's see if we can make a fan fret neck for cigar box guitar with blind fret slots. Blind fret slots are something I've been practicing on this neck. I've got them all working. Everything seems okay. Let's make a fretboard. I'll start out with a .023 end mill to cut the fret slots. This thing is really tiny and I have to go really slow and be careful with my feeds and speeds. Then I'll switch over to an 1/8 inch bit and I'll cut the nut slot as well as the fretboard markers and finish it all up by just trimming away the excess on the outside of the fretboard. I do have the fretboard held down with double-sided tape, so I'm not worried about it flying around. At least I hope it doesn't. There's our cool little black walnut fretboard. Blind fret slots, fan frets. Now there's something I'm not really sure how you do without a CNC machine. With all the pieces together, I'll clamp the fretboard into place, and now I can take some measurements and kind of figure out where everything's gonna live. Once I've determined the location of the stacked heel, I'll go ahead and glue that in place. I cut the piece for the stacked heel just a hair wider than the neck. This gave me a little bit of wiggle room that I could trim away at the router table once the glue has dried. I think now would be an okay time to go ahead and fit this neck to the box. Now that we know the thickness, all I really need to do is adjust the width and then just remove a little bit of extra material to make space for this stacked heel. There really wasn't a whole lot of technical difficulty in this process. It really ended up being just a lot of sawing, chiseling, and some more sawing and chiseling until I got everything to fit. I have a couple of pieces of maple glued inside this box to give me some material to bolt the neck into, and that made it kind of tricky to get in there and remove all the excess. Well, that was a lot more tedious than I expected. Took a lot longer than I thought. Isn't that how things always seem to go? But now, the neck fits down in there really nice. I think we're ready to mark the location of the lid and cut the recess that'll allow the lid to close fully. I'm using my table saw to remove this material just by raising the blade slightly and making about 18 bajillion passes over the blade. It really didn't take all that long, and it wasn't as dramatic as I made it sound, but it worked great, and now we have a nice recess that the lid will fit right into. Before I glue on the fretboard, I'm just going to lay it in place and just double check, actually triple check my measurements, just to make sure everything's where it's supposed to go. I want my bridge to land somewhere in this area. That's about right. So we can glue this fretboard on. Right now the fretboard is long, but my plan is to glue it in place, then I can just trim it off using basically the same method on the table saw that I used to make this recess. That's not going anywhere. Just like I did with the stacked heel block, I also left the fretboard just a shade wider than the neck so that I could trim it exactly flush on the router table. And I'll cut it off to length on the table saw. After drilling some pilot holes all the way through the headstock for the tuners, I'll then use my headstock thicknessing jig to thickness the headstock and also create the radius at the end of the headstock. For fretboard markers, I'm going to use some homemade spalted maple dots. I think they'll look pretty cool with the black walnut. I'll use a flat sanding block to sand the fretboard markers flush, and we're ready for frets. This fret installation is going to be just a little bit different because we have to nip off the end of the fret tang, kind of like if you were installing frets in a bound neck. Got to nip that off with some special nippers, and then we'll knock them into place. It's going to be cool. To get my length, I'm just eyeballing the piece of fret wire and cutting it off with some fret nippers. Then we'll cut off the fret tang and knock the fret into place. Now we'll just repeat that process a bunch of times until the whole neck is fretted. I forgot to mention that after I clip off the fret tang, I am using a very small file to make sure that the underside of the fret is perfectly flush. The fret tang nippers do a great job of cutting most of the fret tang, but sometimes you can get just a little bit of material left over there, and I'm just removing that with the file. Once all the frets are in, I'll use my homemade fret end beveling files to flush the frets with the edge of the fretboard. Why does this make such a horrible sound? Ah, It's terrible. With the fret ends flush and feeling pretty good, they're not polished or anything yet, but I could almost play it. It feels pretty decent. The only thing really left to do is to shape the back of this neck. I got my neck carving buck here. It's time to put on some headphones, crank up some tunes, get a little bit of a workout. Thankfully this neck's a little bit smaller, so this should go pretty quick. The actual shaping of the neck did in fact go pretty quickly, but I forgot about the sanding. That's going to take a while. Ah, the sanding. I think though we're getting mighty close. Probably a few more minutes, just some final areas. And there's one thing that I need to do yet. I need to attempt to get these string grommets off of this old neck and try to put them in this new neck. I don't know how that's going to go. I'll probably do that off camera because that might be a fight. I think I could probably get in there with a chisel or something, but I'm going to finish this sanding, transfer those grommets over, and then we'll be right back. Well, I've got the sanding completed. Finally, look at me, I'm covered in dust. That's a mess. And I've got the holes drilled for the string through grommets. I didn't install the grommets just yet because I need a coat of finish on there first. But before I can put a coat of finish on there, I need to make this an official Haley Guitars by putting the logo on. Ah, look at that. That is probably one of the clearest brands I think I've ever got. That turned out awesome. I thought I left the branding iron on way too long, but maybe that's the key. Leave it on longer than you think, and then brand it quick. That came out awesome. Let's seal it in. For a finish, I'm just using some guitar finishing oil. Super simple, very similar to a true oil finish. Wipe it on, let it tack up a little bit, wipe it off. I'll probably apply 2, possibly 3 coats. It feels really awesome. It's some sort of an oil-based finish. Works great on a neck. Feels awesome. Looks cool. Easy to apply. Don't forget to shake well before using. Are you supposed to shake this? That's fine. If I could open it, that would be great. Come on. Wow, that's really on there. Oh, yeah. No wonder it wouldn't open. Probably crusty because last time I used this, I knocked it over and spilled it all over. So it got everywhere, including all around the threads. And some of that's going inside. Yeah, it'll be all right. Now, I have this little thing there. Helps prevent you from knocking it over. I'm going to put 1 coat of this right on the fretboard as well. I'm not trying to build up a real thick finish on the fretboard, but I want something a little more substantial than just a lemon oil or something like that. All right, let's see what this neck looks like. That's pretty cool. I like it. All right. I think I'm going to just let this sit here and dry for a little while. Then I'll do the final assembly and we'll be back with a completed new, old, rebuilt cigar box guitar. Anyway, I'll see you in just a second with the final product. Well, there it is. Our new, old, rebuilt Cigar Box Guitar, brand new neck. This one is super solid. We're not gonna have that nasty flex like I had on the first one. I am super happy with the way this thing turned out. It looks awesome. It sounds pretty good too, although I don't quite have the right strings. I thought I had a partial pack with the strings I wanted, but the strings that were in there were not at all the ones I wanted. So I'm gonna have to change those eventually. But for now, everything is intonated pretty much perfectly. Could this be the world's first fan fret cigar box guitar? I don't know. For the multi-scale, we have a 25.5-inch scale length on the bass side and a 24.75-inch scale length on the treble side. So not a huge difference in scale length, but definitely something fun to play around with. It looks kind of cool too. I got to play around a little bit more with some multi-scale stuff. But let's see, can we make a little bit of noise? It makes noise. I did rewire all the electronics too, so that pickup in there, those piezo discs are working great. This thing is now ready to be put back into action. It doesn't have to be shoved in the corner because of poor neck design. In fact, earlier in the video, I had mentioned that I thought I could break the neck just by hand, and I wasn't really trying to break it, but I did. So no wonder this thing bowed so much that it was unusable. Anybody need some firewood for your campfire? I couldn't be more happy with the way this turned out. The neck looks great. It feels great. It's got some nice figure in there that comes out. Super cool. And I'm really happy that I took the time to build an entire new neck for this little instrument. I really do like the look of this thing, and now I'm going to be able to enjoy playing it. Hope you guys enjoyed following along with this build. Don't forget too, if you want to follow along with this mess over here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.